Friends 2, the second episode of Phase 10. I'm joined by Trevor, Logic, and Ryan, and we definitely didn't have any alerts going off there. Nobody heard a damn thing. We're all good to go. All right. But thank you guys for joining us today. We want to cover some, quite a few topics, actually, 4 in total. We want to talk about the results of Week 2, right? We want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the play styles of teams, right? But kind of from like a macro level, if you will. We want to talk about some of the predictions as well that we have moving forward, and kind of touch on some of the teams that are struggling and kind of getting kind of on that cusp of being able to have a shot for quals. So let's get right into this here. Let's talk about these results for Week 2. So number 1, the first thing that's sticking out here, there isn't that much of a change in the overall 3 teams. We have STK remaining first overall, Soniqs moving on up into second, and Zenith pushing their way to third. But let's discuss that actually. So STK, still a strong performance in Week 2. Scrappy as always, getting the bulk of their 83 points from kills. A bit lower in terms of points, surely, but you can't expect to do 153 points every single week. It just doesn't quite work out like that. But they continue to look strong in the team fights. You know, there's a good chance they'll finish first overall in the group stages. I think it's pretty confident. I'm pretty confident, at least in saying that. But still, what were you seeing out of SDK come this week?
So looking at SDK, I don't think they changed all that much. I do think that they realized that they're riding on their own momentum wave right now, and that if they continue this, only good can come up. So they focused on their consistency, I think, a lot. And I think there was a couple times where we saw them have a little bit of a harder time. I think considering the nature of this group stage, of where teams are rotating, every week has the same 2 groups you could play against, but at different days and all that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of factors, but I think that SDK has focused on sharpening their consistency, as they always do. And they've showed why they're number 1 right now.
100%. Anybody else want to add anything to that? Because there's not a whole lot to say about SDK that we haven't already.
SDK is they're in cruise control now. They're just going after the bonuses. They're having fun. They qualified in the first week, so there's not much to say about them. They're doing their job. What's expected of them.
100%.
So yeah, they're cruising.
Guaranteed. Ryan, anything else you want to add to that?
I almost feel like they're practicing, to be honest, because I remember I was sitting in when I was listening in on a game, and I remember Waldo calling like, the STK got a knock on this team. It's like, oh, there's no way they're gonna push that. They can't push that. And what do you know? They're like, oh, they're pushing. And Los was literally like, I mean, they're 100 points ahead of the next team. They can do whatever they want. and like they started pushing that team. Like it was like, oh, it wasn't even that great a push, but they did it anyway. And I feel like they're just trying things at this point.
Yeah,
just to test themselves.
Guaranteed. I give me 1 second here. I think we're getting a little bit of an echo. At least that's what I'm reading in chat. Sounds like there's a bit of an echo. I don't know why that.
Let us know if you needed to talk.
Yeah, let me know who it is.
Give me a moment here. I'll just mute everybody.
Is it all 3 of us?
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Let's see. Is that any better? Well, we'll figure it out as we go along. But moving on to the second point here, which is Soniqs. They looked strong in Week 2, surpassing the Hardshifts to claim second overall. And to me, the performance looked dominant. I thought it looked dominant from the outside looking in. And I was thinking back to the third match on day 3. They had an early run in with Liberate. And I've literally never in my life seen a situation go from really questionable, where like, oh, we're passing by, some people are shooting, to something where it just immediately falls apart for a team. They stopped on a dime and just started blasting, taking 3 Liberate members with them and then pulling away. The last Liberate member, he was out. He just split. He was done. And that was wild to see. But stuff like that we know Soniqs is capable of, because they're just fraggers. But yeah, they dished out, what was it, 102 points for the week. There was a seat swap action. H-Win did a backflip off a tree with a bike. It was insane. But I think they remain consistent, definitely. But Trevor, what were you seeing out of them this week?
I think what we're seeing at the top is the leaderboard settling out to what everyone kind of expects. We're the only one lacking behind. We're only 1 spot behind now. But they're also, it's a similar story with all these top teams. They're in cruise control. Like, they qualified, they can have fun. like a little bit. That's basically people going for these, fun plays, seat swap plays. But they're also cleaning up because when that stress comes off your team, like there's initial stress maybe week one a little bit with the top teams, but once that stress is gone, you're able just to have fun, and that's when fragging like really starts stepping up. At least I know that is how it works on our team. So, yeah, I have to say they're cruising.
Yeah, guaranteed. How about you, Logic? Anything you want to add to that?
I think our week 2 was I think on the group A versus C games, like on our first games like on Saturday, I think we had to like just pick up a slight bit from the start, but I think like the Sunday was the definition of just all of us playing like on our like within our comfort zones. I think the guys definitely felt much more confident going into that Sunday, and I think we all know that like we all know exactly what it takes for each one of them to perform, and I think they put themselves in those situations really well on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Ryan, anything you want to add to them? Anything sticking out with Soniqs?
I mean, it's just consistent. Like they had 1 point difference from their first week to their second week. I mean, they're just their second day on their first week was like pretty low, but it was a bit more consistent between the days as much as, or as far, like compared to their first pop-off day on their week 1. But I don't know, they're just doing Sonics things. Like it's Tig's doing what you expect of him. Like there's not really too much to say. It's pretty much what everyone expects.
Right. Most definitely. But that kind of brings us into the next spot with Zenith. The first thing that comes to mind when talking about Zenith is flexibility. I've seen this team try out different methods of approach on situations, and I think they've looked strong in every one of them. 88 points up for the week put them into the top 3 overall, and we talked about that last week, where like what needs to happen for Zenith to move forward, really, and to kind of edge their way into that top 3 position. But match 4 of day 3 stuck out as a strong moment for Zenith. They kind of were fed circle. They were in a compound. They were just hanging out, but they still remained dominant in there. I think only 1 knock came out on them. They literally were able to hold the entire time, push back every single team, or really wipe every single team that tried to aggress up onto them. And it probably is hard when you have the fragging power and you'd like to spread out and clap everyone's cheeks, but you just kind of hang tight, play the slower game, and then go for the win. But Zenith, again, winning those ones that they should win. I'm pretty confident in them moving forward. But Ryan, what are you seeing from them?
Honestly, I think the biggest strength of Zenith is just straight up fragging power. Like I've never sat there and been like, oh, this is like a huge brain play, or like they out rotate teams or anything. They just win fights when they need to win them. And I mean, they hit their shots. Like I really don't think there's like anything specific that they're like doing that is like, oh, this separates them from any other team. It's just they just hit their shots and win fights when they need to, and gets them the points they need.
Yeah, most definitely. Anybody else? Trevor, Logic?
Sure. I mean, I touched on this last week. Zenith is now a team that they're the first team I consider a threat to like the top 3 teams or whatever that has come together now. They're with the addition of Poon and Shin, they can be scary. Like I think they can compete. They can win a lot of fights. Like Shin's like a kid who I know really well, and I do not want to. He's a kid I don't want to fight every day. I mean, he's super talented. He's the guy that will sit. And when he is sitting in those compounds getting fed, he's the one that'll shoot the top of your car until it blows up. So it's like doing really annoying things like that, but that kind of stuff adds up to a team. That was something like we learned. I know he learned when we went, to an international competition. Like little things like that add up, and I think with time this team will just get stronger. And but I'm happy because, like I said, I have friends on that team and they're in a good spot. But we're coming for them this weekend. So
perfect. So Logic, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think coming off of when we discussed last week of Zenith's potential, I feel like they were able to utilize a lot more of their action in terms of their play style, where I think the previous renditions of Zenith may not have yielded such aggression at times, but at the same time, this team knows when they knows much better where they can or can't be aggressive. And I think that whenever they play to their strengths and their control, that they are very dangerous. and that we've seen they only on day 3 on that Sunday had 3 points less more than us on that day. So I think they made very stable, strong plays time and time again, and I think combined with their placement points and their kill points, they actually had a really good weekend. So they're starting to really put it together now and become a much more, I guess, they're much more willing to take action in order to get whatever points they can.
Most definitely. But that kind of rounds it out for our top 3 teams. Again, not that much change there, aside from Zenith kind of creeping out and Hardshifts going down a little bit. But let's kind of go on into those middle teams, teams 5 through 8. There's been quite a bit of movement within there, but it's also still pretty tight.
We're back. We're back.
What?
Oath is back.
Exactly. Oath's there, and it's the biggest thing that I'm noticing with those middle teams is there's a very little point spread between them. I think it's 38 points between 3rd and 8th overall, so it's still pretty tight, and anybody knows that's only one good day to just totally blow your way through that and get up there. But yeah, our first team is Oath, 108 points over the weekend. What do you know? Certainly constitutes a great performance. They climbed out from 8th all the way up to 4th, and we saw them remain scrappy and smooth out some of those wrinkles they had in the first week. The ending of the first match on day 3 was incredible. You had Snickers literally take the car, send it in, take Liberate out. It was insane the way that they played that. But Oath is capable of that, and we know that most definitely. But when it comes to that, though, Soniqs, what kind of fancy plays were you seeing out of them this week?
I was seeing a lot of times where they were able to keep 4 up going into the late game, and I think that's a lot of things of where the longer you can keep 4 up, the only the better your game can get, and you can also tend to maximize that kind of chance. But I also think that their decision making was a lot more, I guess, cohesive around this time, and it looked like all of them knew exactly what they needed to do at the exact time in order to close out games or get as deep as possible. And I think that knowing their potential as a team and where they can easily just jump onto, I think that this kind of performance this weekend is what they're usually capable of, and I definitely can see more of that happening from them as well. I think when I originally saw Pat Caps join the team, I always had the question is Pat Caps going to be the shot caller? Is someone else going to pick up the shot caller? And figuring out eventually figuring out that Reload picked up the shot calling, and then Pat Caps is they're kind of maybe low key player at the same time, maybe even being put to the forefront at times. I think they're figuring out their way that they want to play, and that differs from team to team, and I think that once they find their stride, they can get going just like they did this weekend. So
definitely. How about you, Ryan?
All right, so I think I want to hit on the point that Soniqs just brought up of how they were able to keep 4 strong towards the late game, because I think Oath is probably there's very few teams in all of NA, and I could prep 1 or 2 maybe that can fight on par with Oath in a 4v4, in a straight up 4v4, that I would say is as scary as Oath is. If Oath has all 4 up and they're in a straight up fight where they're fighting together and they're not trying to do other things, whatever, there's no teams one, maybe STK, Soniqs, and then everyone else is I mean, Trevor wants to bring up Zenith now, but I don't think there's other teams.
I'm just being nice. I don't actually believe
it. No, but it's just you have 4 strong going into the late game as Oath. When you're able to pick up a lot of kills, it's just they're gonna start farming and they're just winning fights. They're just not gonna lose fights 4 strong like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're a team that they have to lose people early and lose people randomly to have bad days. If they're staying 4 strong, they're gonna get their points.
Most definitely. And Trevor, close it out for us here on your team.
Yeah, 108 points over the weekend. I said 150 as a prediction, so we came in a little short, unfortunately. But we did the due diligence on Sunday. We had 74 points I think that day, and everyone showed up and we played. And it's we're a team that once we get rolling, and if we get rolling early, we I don't know, we take the day over. We won that first game, you talked about Sagers making that play, but I'd say actually, the next game was the even better game for us. Even though we didn't win, we were put in a really tough spot with a shift, and Rello made us scout that game. That I would say 90% of the players in this lobby wouldn't even be looking at that location because they would assume it wouldn't be free. And we took a winning spot and we were able to just frag. I remember in the second game, Pat got to the compound. He said, "Oh my God, there's so much loot in this compound." And then Snakers got there and said, "I have 500 bullets. I'm not going to talk for a while." And he just started turreting. He just started killing everybody. And when I hear my guys are in a good spot where they can see everybody and they have all the resources they need, that they're happy. And if that happens early in the day, it's scary for the rest of the lobby. Going off what the other guys, it's cool to hear from the other coaches who watch the games, something that we talked about as a team come to fruition. We talked about after that first weekend, let's get us into the late game. The whole premise of our team, we were built because at the start of this year, the future of PUBG was kind of uncertain. And the whole goal of this team was, let's get the best people together and let's juice every last drop of money out of PUBG we can. Let's win every single fight. Let's have no questions. That was the goal of this team from get-go, is have the best players you can get onto one roster. And I think that showed this weekend. And it's cool to hear from other people that, I strongly believe, obviously I'm very confident in my guys, but if we get into that late game as 4, they don't have to be from North America. I don't care who it is. I don't think they're going to beat us.
Mm-hmm.
So...
I like it. And that brings us to the next team, Veritas, which is another team that we talked about at length last week as well. They had a challenging first showing, but the second week demonstrated the strength of the roster, right? They secured 102 points, which vaulted them from 9th to 5th. They basically did the same shift that Oath did, just one spot behind them. But they played smart. They seemed to have a firm grasp on when to, press on the gas, when to press on the brake. And you'd see them in some rough spots in some of the matches, but if you gave them even an inch, they would capitalize on it, and they would deliver, most definitely. And Solagic called it last week that they would just only grow from there. I think we all agreed. But Trevor, let's bounce it right back to you with Veritas.
Yeah, Veritas, they're a team that's working through kinks probably, and it showed from week to week here because they brought in new players, and they had a big roster shuffle, and they probably have new voices, and they're figuring it out. And I think they're smart to use the group stage as a tool to work these kinks out. And it's showing, they, like you said, they almost did the same jump we did. They had a 102 point weekend. That's nothing, that's 51 points a day average. And I don't know, they're playing super well. I just think everything about that team just looked a lot smoother this weekend. Mm-hmm. Everything about that team just looked a lot more cohesive. And I think that's just going to be a trend. Hopefully they continue to hold through into the next weekend. And that just goes with the territory when you have, half the team gets changed.
Yeah.
So it's, it's not even really the same team as last time for all we know.
100%. 100%. Sil, how about you? This is your call.
Yeah, so segueing off of not only what I talked about last week, but also how I mentioned about where Oath was able to bring 4 as a full team into the late game. And I think for teams that make a major change, whether it's a structural change or if it's a personnel change, or in this case, they have half the roster is gone, and then they take 2 other people, plug them in, and then go immediately within a couple weeks go into a group stage. I believe that as a person that's observing, as a coach and whatnot, the biggest thing I see a lot of teams come across is that no matter what kind of decisions they make together as a team or not, is that it's harder for them to work together to not lose one early. Because a lot of times, these people will come in, they're like, oh, I just need to do what I need to do, and I need to, kind of follow the team, and then we need to, link up, make decisions, and then boom, execute. And I think there's a complication that comes out when no matter how capable some of your players are, if you put them together and they can't immediately get it going to the point where they can't not one dies early, or one of them's late, or one of them's left out, or something happens and you're caught up from rotation to the point where one player is far away from your team and can't take action altogether. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles any new team can come across, and I think that they're tackling it slowly together to the point where they can take people into the late game, or not even take people to the late game that far, or to the point where you win, but they bring up points every single game. Whether it's 8 kills and a fourth, or 9 kills and a third. Like, you know, like it builds. And looking at, you know, their first day of play this weekend, they had 65 points, followed by another day where they ended up in the top 5 with another 37. You know, like you were mentioning, they made a jump similar to Oath, where, you know, they're taking this time to figure things out, and then that they're slowly putting it together, and that can be really scary come you know, let's say like grand finals or in the future for any other team.
Definitely. How about you, Ryan? Anything they didn't touch on?
I mean, honestly, well, I was also one of the ones that said that last week Veritas was one of the teams I'm looking at to step it up, and because this is how I would be expecting players of their caliber to be playing. And I also want to say that I'm like, it's surprising that Oath even had more points than them when half the games Veritas had 3 wins and 2 second places. Like, if you're getting top 2 in half the games you play, like, how the hell is a team getting more points than you? Yet Oath still managed to do it somehow, but
They
like
killed a lot of people, Ryan.
yeah.
I don't know. Rello. I don't. This was a big week for Rello because he decided to frag and call at the same time for the first time. So
there just isn't like much to say. Like they covered most of it. I'm just saying, like, this is what I was expecting of Veritas to be doing. Like, they're performing at expectations now, in my opinion.
And also, like, adding on to Veritas, is like we mentioned week 1 of this podcast, of where they were one of those like exemplified teams of where they consolidated power, even having it to people outside of the region. And I think that, you know, like bringing someone like Michael and D-Treats, considering, like, you know, who D-Treats was coming from the previous team and whatnot, like they kind of took, like, you know, in like, you know, what can we really use, and you know, they're trying to figure that out right now. So
definitely, most definitely. That brings us into to a team that actually didn't have any roster changes through all of PCS, which was Hardshifts. And they looked to have a little bit more difficulty this week. You know, they dropped down a little bit, you know, but they were still able to put up 45 points, ending in 6th overall. But matching 5th place, you know, in terms of points, for a total of 159 right there with Veritas. They had some earlier deaths. I saw Lobes drop twice early, and I know that he's one of their, if not their biggest playmaker. I think arguably their biggest playmaker, and I know that probably is a huge blow to lose him early in some of those matches. But I think overall they still did pretty strong. Realistically, even if they didn't put up a single point, I think they would still be in a position to qualify. You know, they have a good point spread for the time being. But yeah, what were you thinking on the Hardships, Ryan?
Well, I'm looking at it now, and from what I see is that they only had like really one good game the entire weekend, and then everything else was just kind of like, they're just kind of like almost like, what's the term I'm looking for? Like damage control. It's like they're getting like 3 to 6 points every other game, and then they have that like one standout game. And it's like, I mean, if you're getting those 3 to 6 points, you're gonna, you know, stay up in the leaderboards, which is what they did. Like, they didn't drop too far, but they're not gonna keep up with, you know, STK, Soniqs. Like, these teams are gonna be averaging 7 to 10 points. You know, like, if you're just averaging 5 to 6, you're gonna fall behind, and you're not gonna be able to keep up. But it's like, I mean, I don't think we've ever like sat there and said the Hardships are at the same level as those teams. So I don't know. It is what I think. You brought up a great point though, is like, if Lobes is dead, like, yeah, Luke and the other players are great, but like Lobes is really that like that go-to player that's gonna make the play that's needed for them to push them into the late game.
Definitely. Sil, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I think Hardships this weekend had a harder time in the last day of play, and just looking at, like, you know, I guess their points haul for the weekend, which was about 45. I think that's the story of when they don't have, when they're given the disadvantage of where, you know, like, you lose someone early, circle shifts away, don't have as many cards to make a hard rotate, you know, all these kind of things. I think Hardships is the kind of team that will not take any outrageous, dangerous, like, risk early on, and they'll take that, like, you know, they'll take the extra cards, they'll take whatever they can, and utilize all their resources to try to get around every other team, and pretty much like get to the other side of the map where literally like nothing happens. And I think a lot of times when you look at, you know, where they're coming from, like from circle to circle and the rotates and whatnot, I think looking at also that combined with how they play, they probably ran into like a lot of earlier issues that might have stopped them from you know, like, going forward. Either that, or, you know, like bringing up the Lobes point of where like I feel like looking at this team and knowing what they're capable of, or like what they were capable of, and showing up like in week 1, I think like for it to line up correctly, that like a lot of things need to go right. But like that doesn't go to say like a lot of things like necessarily like didn't line up, but maybe not exactly the same as from what we saw from week 1. And I think like looking at Lobes' impact as well is that we definitely saw less impact from Lobes himself, maybe as a playmaker, but like that's when you look at teams and say like, okay, like who else can pick it up? Like who else is going to be that guy that like literally makes something happen out of nothing. And like looking at like like Chuba Bubba's like a very solid like anchor player. He's always there. He's making very smart plays and whatnot. For like they even highlighted that point where he like eliminated the team by himself as the last member alive and eventually made it out. And then however farther he made it, like that's one of those plays where you don't necessarily want to be reliant on those kind of performances, but you want to come together and make like your plan and approach to the game work. And I think like maybe that might not have gone as well for this weekend.
Definitely. Trevor, anything else you want to touch on with the Hardshifts?
Yeah, I just there's someone we talked about a lot last week naturally because they were at the top, and I hope that they just weren't like a one weekend wonder kind of thing. We're all fans of them because they've been around for a long time and we've known them, and I just hope they figure it out here because they've kind of always hovered in this middle ground. And I mean, they're a team that had a 60+ point lead on us. They scored more points in their first day than we had all weekend, the first weekend. And maybe when they were given a couple tougher circles, maybe they didn't go their way as hot. And that's the kind of circles, alluding off what the other guy said, where you kind of need to take those risks. You need to make those big plays sometimes. Sometimes when the circle goes away from you, you're going to have to make a send. You're going to have to do something to get into the zone. And so I hope that they're able to bounce back this weekend. And but yeah, they're definitely a team to keep your eyes on.
Definitely. And that brings us to Dodge. Dodge was able to put up 73 points, just a little shy of their previous week's performance, but still really good performance overall. Very similar to that first week. They won the matches they should win. And the other matches were still, not bad. They were averaging those 5 points. And like we said just earlier, it's if you can just do that, if you can just cruise by and put up those points and still have those big games in there, you will solidify your place in that top 8 position, right? But yeah, if they did go out, they went out kicking and screaming. I still like what I'm seeing out of Dodge. I still have a lot of faith in them. I think the leaderboard is looking pretty strong in that area. I think a lot of those teams are kind of around that same mark. But Sil, what are your thoughts on Dodge?
Looking at Dodge, seeing how like I guess like their kind of like kill distribution works is like you kind of see like people stepping up like on one day, another guy steps up another day. And I think when you look at this team and what they put together for this PCS, I think compared to the other teams where they kind of find like their way deeper and like kind of find their ways to use their talent, I think this is more of a team that's figuring out like, okay, what can we do that works? And not necessarily something that works to the point where you win every single game, but I think that they're trying to find out like like how can we put up points in like the way we play without ever like taking like the most gigantic risk possible. So they're the kind of team that will like sit there, kind of watch other people and see what they do, and just kind of focus on themselves the whole time. And where I feel like they can run into their limits is when they have a spot in the zone, or they have a spot somewhere where they set up, and then whether the circle doesn't go their way or whether like someone's in front of them that prevents them from doing what they want to do, that's where I feel like sometimes you might see the lack of taking a risk, or like the lack of like what if this, what if that, like should we try this, or like you wonder from that kind of team like if there's anybody that could step up, which is that is a good thing, but you also wonder if they're not handed an advantage to where they can play however they usually want to do, which is like kind of quiet, show up in the late game or show up in the mid game and kind of like get their points here and there and then like make their way out. Like you wonder what is it going to take that pushes them past just finding out what works for them versus what works for them and gets them like consistent points every single game, rather than like relying on being handed an advantage, I guess. So
definitely. How about you, Trevor? What are your thoughts on Dodge?
Well, I'm a big Lamp a Lot fan, so I've been friends with that guy for a while, and so I hope they keep doing well. But I mean, I don't know. That's another one where Sean got the call ahead of me here, and he kind of hit the nail on the head there. And they're a team that came out really strong. They did have a lot of favorable circles in that first week, but that can be a big confidence building thing for a new team because you're put into that late game situation. You're put against these teams. You get these wins, and you realize like, oh, we can compete. There's nothing to worry about. So, what's it gonna take for them to keep up the strategy or keep up the momentum, so they're not just bleeding down the leaderboard slowly? This is another team that had a huge lead on us going in this weekend, and we were able to surpass. But like all these kind of mid-pack teams have the pressure off them this week a little bit because they've qualified. So I think it's going to be a really for the most part they've qualified if you're like within the top 8 right now. So it's going to be a really fun weekend to watch these teams perform without the stress of like, oh, we might not make it. So I want to see with that stress off this weekend if they're able to put up some big numbers again like the first weekend.
Definitely. Ryan, was there anything you wanted to add to that with Dodge?
It's kind of got okay, so it doesn't have to do with Dodge, but it has to do with a lot of the other top teams here. So one of the things I've noticed, looking at the spreadsheet that was provided to us by CD6, here at the Man CD6, one of the things I noticed is that what seems to be consistent with like a lot of these top teams is in one of the stats, it's called last one standing. So basically what this means is that your team is not getting fully wiped and you have somebody left alive and they're the last man standing. Now, when I'm looking at it, a lot of these teams, they'd have zeros across the board, which means that they all basically die together. They like whatever fight that they're in, if they lose it, they all go. And it's like a lot of the top teams that are high up in the standings, Soniqs, STK, Zenith, Dodge, Oath, like they all have 8 to 12 games where they have people that are like last one standing, and a lot of the bottom teams have zero. Now Dodge, the only team that has more than them is Zenith, and if that, I mean, this could be a multitude of things. It actually means like it's if you stay alive with the chicken dinner. Okay, so I might just be completely off on this CD6. So that means that they won, and okay, so that's why a lot of these teams have zero. That makes a lot more sense then. My bad on this point. Then we gotta.
No worries at all.
But I mean, either way, that means that they're winning games. So that's
Yeah.
another thing.
No, most definitely, and it is. You are right though. Because they do have a reasonable amount of placement points, so they do manage to last in a lot of these circles, a lot of these fights, a lot of these matches. They do manage to last. So you are definitely right.
I mean, there was one other point I wanted to bring up though. Is Adam and Lamp seem to be really, really doing well together as far as like being able to frag out. And I don't know if that's if like they needed time to figure that out or like what or like because it seemed to have gelled immediately from week one. Like they're pretty consistent from week to week, and they're leading their team both in kills. Lamp has one more than Adam, but I mean they're not only leading their team, but they're like, I mean obviously you have all of STK ahead of them, but uh, besides that, it's just a couple individuals that have more than them, and so they're doing well with frags. And I mean, you expect that from Lamp. Adam is returning back to form. He's always been a solid player, and so. But yeah, CD6, like I said, if that was that would be pretty cool to look into of like being the last one alive on your team and like how many points you could get as like a solo or a duo.
Most definitely.
I feel like good teams are really good at that. At picking up those scrap points.
Yeah, it's like picking up every little bit that they can. Like even if there's one guy alive, like he constantly will calculate like, okay, if I shoot right now, is this a guaranteed kill? And if I shoot right now, am I gonna get any deeper than I am right now? It's like, yeah, like a lot of these considerations come into effect of where like if I shoot right now, I'm dead. Or like, if I shoot right now, that team over there that I kind of want to go towards close and might have no idea about me will know about me and kind of things. And I think like that's a really cool stat if we can come up with that.
Also, speaking of that, I want to ask you guys, like, what do you guys, Trevor and Sologic, are your guys' teams, are they similar to like, do they coach their last players through the game? or do they just kind of let them play the game?
Depends on who it is, I guess. Most of the time, we will feed the necessary like basic info. Like someone will watch kill feed. Somebody will say like who they think is up and where they are. Like 2 of SDKs to your east, 4 Soniqs to your north. They're probably going to wrap right, something like that. Some players are more like Snakers is probably like our best snake, like ironically, because a lot of our mentality in snaking is like when you get into that late game situation, if you can kill somebody, it's the same as getting a placement. So if you sat there and laid down and died, like what's the point? Mm-hmm. So Snakers is always that guy. He'll just run. If he hears a fight, he'll just run over and try to get 2 kills out of the deal. Because 2 kills in a 6 is better than no kills in a 5th. So that's but it's definitely player dependent. But we'll always feed the basic info. But I have pretty independent players, so most of the time they're handle it on their own. I don't know about you, Sean.
Yeah, I think that too. Is that I think a lot of my players have their own way of playing the game, even though that's kind of ironic to like let's say, like as a team they look really amazing, but at the same time I'm kind of saying like they have their own ways to play. And even though some of them might be like, hey, like like why don't you go check that out? And then maybe he's like, no, I think I'm fine. Like like I'll just sit right here. And I think like no, nobody sees me. And like there's a couple of times where let's say like Mime's alive, and then he sometimes will like like you've seen it time and time again where he's that guy in that one spot where like he's like, how was he alive there, or how was he there? And then sometimes he's like, oh yeah, like I'm just gonna go here. And then like even though like Shrimsy, H1, and Tickleton are like, you are crazy, like you are dead, like you go, you're dead, like you can stay where you are right now, but you're gonna go and die. And then he's just like, no, it's fine. And then somehow we're just like, how is he alive? Like, and then like we're just wondering that, like, is this just like Mime's power where he can like kind of go somewhere and like nobody bats an eye, like somehow just like he just sits there, and then when he gets found, and then he like
I mean, to counter Sean's point though, whenever we're fighting Sonics, there's always a call. Mime's probably right in front of you over this ridge 10 feet away. Mime's probably to your left 5 meters away in a dumb spot.
Yeah.
Like
there's always a possibility too, yeah.
And then we always go, what an idiot, and then we just then we get a 4v3. So
yeah,
if you recognize it's Sonics, you can recognize it pretty fast. So
yeah. That's always a possibility, but I think a lot of my players will like they will have their moment where like the other players will give them that chance, like let's just let me play, or like like give me like whisper me like, oh, like that's SDK, or like that's Oath, or like it's a 3v2 or it's 3v45, and then you're alone or something like that. Like so the basic info will go, but I think like if they're given the piece to play on their own, they would rather prefer that.
Do your guys go into whisper mode?
Yeah.
Fail's the biggest offender. It's never been brought up, but as soon as like somebody is ratting, they're solo snaking, Fail's instant whisper mode. Like he's like, hey guys, okay, there's one guy. They're probably getting. You're the best. Good job. I'm always laughing like to myself because I'm just muted.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true.
Like they all act like all of a sudden the sound in the game got like way quieter. It's fun, but yeah, just basic info mainly. But
that's a good question though. that is a very good question. I'm glad you asked that, Ryan, because that's not something that I think I would have thought to ever bring up, but it's a good point. Definitely a good point. Moving on to the last team that we have in that 5 to 8th spot, we have Duel, and we spoke about them last week. Very similar to Veritas, who's also kind of struggling. They have a roster of really talented people, and I don't think anybody could ever debate that. And they delivered heavily with 96 points. I want to say it was the 3rd strongest of the week, I believe, and it took them all the way from 17th to 8th. Their team fights looked better. They looked like they were playing smarter, and if they went back to the drawing board, they certainly came back with some great success. But very similar to their counterparts in the bracket, if we see them close out the 3rd week with a similar performance, who knows where they'll end up, But Trevor, what were you thinking and seeing with Duel?
Duel's an interesting one because I feel like they quietly got their 90, even though it's weird to say that. It feels like they almost quietly got their 96 points. They played insanely well. They were constantly in the late game. And it's kind of to be expected, I feel like, because this team, even though they had a rough first week, like they have a lot, like this is kind of like an OG team, and a lot of them played together. 3 of them were from the Simplicity roster originally. And so I expect them. They're a team I expect to do better than the teams that are right above them, just based off their roster and their history of playing together. So, I mean, it's like I'm saying, they were quietly got there because I didn't pay. You know, I feel like because we've talked about this before, and I'm watching VODs or I watch my team specifically, so I can't remember a lot of situations where we were up against a Duel, like multiple games. So when I saw that they had that many points at the end of the weekend, I was kind of taken back. I was like, oh, they played really good. And that's all I kind of have to say. You know, like I really hope that let's see if they can carry this through and they can, finish top 4, top 5 this weekend.
Definitely. Ryan, how about you with Duel?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've always noticed with Duel is that Wooly is very good at getting them into good like positions. Like they're always in good positions, in like positions that could get them into the late game. But one of the things that we always, or at least my team always like commented on, because they're very good friends with a lot of the Duel players, is that it just seemed like they just lose the fights that they need to be winning at the end, or like that they should be winning. It's like they're holding a strong position and then they just lose it. It's like how that shouldn't be happening. Like you shouldn't just like get cleanly wiped when you're in a strong position and one team pushes you and like you just lose it. And that was one of one of the things that I feel like they were struggling with, that maybe they just improved on. Things just happened to go differently, but and I think the thing why Trevor thinks that they had like quietly was that like they only had one win, but they had 5 games where they had over 10 points. And it wasn't like the only one of these games was it like they popped off in kills. Like the rest of it was just like they just had solid games every game, except for one. They only had one bad game, and when you only have one bad game out of 10, like you're gonna get 80 points.
Which to go off your point, is usually a sign of a good team. Maybe
Yeah.
the circles aren't going your way and you're not getting the fed games. But if you're constantly putting up good games, like when you do get your day or your weekend, that's when they climb to the top. So yeah, they're definitely a team I didn't have my eye on, and now I do. Put it that way.
Definitely. And Sil, how about you? Anything?
Let's say right to us.
Yeah, I actually know Wooly pretty well. Me and him do end up like talking a lot about PUBG, and I think he's the kind of person where he asks a lot in the terms of finding answers. And I think a lot of times when you saw, he's been through many great rosters in PUBG, whether on Duel, Simplicity, NRG and all that kind of stuff, of where like, he surrounds himself with good players and ends up like, like doing good, but was always put in the spot of where, I guess like they were kind of given the chance or they had the opportunity to take like a game by their grasp, like absolutely like, like wash out one end of the circle and whatnot. And I feel like there was times where I guess I wanted more, but like going back to Trevor's point about like, these guys have all played together at some point. And I think that is a strength of when you reform a team with a fresh mindset. I think you can, like extract the maximum very quickly. And, like week 1, they literally put up like 43 points. And then like, like they come out of week 2 and they are now within top 8 and within striking distance of like, like the top 5, like very easily with like one good game. And I think that was a progress of Wooly and the team getting together to push their boundaries of what they used to play like. And I think while Wooly was always a person that can lead his team well, it was always down to him like trying to pull the team together to do something together, of where he says, hey guys, we need to set up for this and make sure we can't get screwed by this, and we can go forward and make sure that like we eventually want to end up here. And a lot of times I saw there like like I guess maybe the last PCS you can describe it as like untaken opportunities were present, and eventually they lost those opportunities, ending in early deaths or mid-game deaths with like not as many kills, or late game deaths of where they could very easily close it out and eventually not close it out. So like there was always a time where you can mention Wooly's name. It's kind of like one of those household names of PUBG esports, of where like he is a great leader, and that like with the right players and with the right kind of like day, they can always do very well. But I think they kind of changed it up of where they want to be there all the time, of where they like it doesn't matter if it's their day or if they're not getting the circles. They want to they want to have like whether they get handed a fed game and they come out with let's say a win and 10 kills, they want to translate that energy into they got absolutely screwed by circle, 4 circles away, and they're constantly chasing the edge, and they come up with like 12 kills. Because there was a game where I literally saw them in a very weird uphill spot, and I asked myself, like, how are they alive? But they had like 14 kills. So like wherever they put themselves in, they found a way to come out like, maximizing every single game. And I think if that can continue, they can easily start climbing, like, beyond just from the top 8 and just easily, like, eclipse the top 4 or 5. Like, if they consistently can do this, of where they maximize every single game, because I feel like a top trait in a lot of, let's say, like, like our games, SDK's games, Oath's games, like, that kind of like top 3 NA bubble of where these two teams are trying to, like, join it and increase it, make it top 4, top 5, is that they, like, us, like SDK and Oath, are able to come, like, randomly, like, come up with 8 to 9 to 10-point games, even though we die like bottom 8, within the bottom 8 somewhere, of where, like, the circle just completely went elsewhere. That none of the attention was on us, but yet all the action was happening around our edge, and we eventually just kind of made it in, died out, and then, like, but had like more points in total of that match than like the top, like maybe like 6th team or something like that. So they're all, like, going back to the point where Trevor was talking about, like, how they quietly made it there. I think it's very valid considering how many points they put up, yet, like, we didn't really see too much of a breakdown of how they played and got to these points.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think we covered everything kind of on Duel. Anything else anybody wants to add on Duel there?
I think we're good.
No. All right, cool. Well, let us kind of make our way into this next topic. I know we have some more to talk about in the predictions portion about some of the other teams. But let's kind of do a deep dive here with the play styles. We talked about it previously, but yeah, let's discuss this here. When it comes to the play styles, right? we've kind of touched on this indirectly by talking about some of the way the teams play, what different things some of the teams can do in the bottom portions of leaderboards to kind of thrust themselves up. And one thing that I've seen that kind of sticks out with different teams and their different play styles is kind of either A, playing edge and not necessarily having the fragging power potentially to play edge, or maybe the map knowledge to play edge, or teams holding center and having a great position, but then the second they leave the position, they just can't quite find the balance to do anything, and they just get wiped off the board. But if we were to kind of look past some of the other things and kind of boil this down to some of the different play styles between playing edge and between playing center, I really want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And Trevor, I think I'm going to start with you to kind of break this down for us and maybe get a little deeper.
Sure. Playing edge versus playing center. Both of the strategies, if performed correctly, or like any good PUBG strategy, it's just about reducing like the amount of RNG that's going to affect you in the game in their own way. Playing center, you know, historically you loot quickly, you drive to the middle of the zone, and then if you're in the middle of the circle, you're likely to be in the middle of the next circle and the next circle. Where playing edge is more about, let's get the best loot we possibly can. Let's come in and let's have a little bit of a spread, and let's scout a lot of things, and we'll play for the next shift. I think it's cool that like Sean's here because like his team, so, the Soniqs, and before that, the same roster under different organizations, they've been playing. They are like the proponent of that middle strategy, that center strategy, for a long time. He probably knows it better than anybody. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, I'm here, and my team is, I would, SDK also is an edge team as well, but I'm I'd say one of the best edge teams in North America, and I can speak about that for a long time. So if we want to get like into the nuances of it, if we want to talk about center team, I think I'd probably pass the one off to Sean, and he could kind of give us some more insight on that, and we'll bounce back to edge.
Yeah,
perfect. Let's go with it.
Yeah, so looking at like historically our team, like through the timeline of Genesis and whatnot, at least from when I entered, the center style is something that a lot of people do kind of assume with, like, okay, you go, you loot early, or like, you leave early, you get to the center of the zone, you get set up, and then you kind of just sit there, and then like, like some people will associate like, oh, like, the circle has to go there in order for you to do good. That's like one assumption, like, and then there's other assumptions where, like, if they're in the center of the zone, they don't want to be on edge, or like they don't want, like, the worst thing that can happen is a hard shift that completely sends the circle the other way, or like they get in the center, they get set up, and then they get crashed because they're in such a center spot that's so good everybody else wants it. So you see a lot of these questions being tossed around when people talk about playing center, and I think playing center is this: you give up things early game, you give up loot, you give up, like possibly other positions that are like more or less around your loot spot. Sometimes it depends what a circle is. You give up a lot in terms of sacrificing for your positioning early, and I think that center has the proponents of, if you get in a great position that's good for like all the surrounding area, that's great. But if you get into like there's good and bad center positions that can literally just be like one of those positions where it looks good just because it's in the center. Everything else around it kind of sucks. So you have to decide when it comes to center play, like you kind of have to do it where you don't. It sounds odd, but you kind of get there and have to not depend on the circle necessarily coming back to you. It's nice if it does, but if you plan for that, you can't plan to leave from your spot no matter where it goes. And I think our team got really good at getting a center position circle early, or getting somewhere like where we can set up to play out of really early, and sacrificing that is something that we just are used to. And sometimes we may not be like the most center team possible, but we'll always find out, like, from here we can do this, from here we can do that, like from here Tig can see this or Tig can see that, and then we can kind of branch out and play. But if we get punished, or if we lose somebody, or someone else comes crashing, then we have to take that fight there or something like that. So looking at center objectively, some people will like say like, oh, like they loot Pachinki, they'll probably be a center team, or like they loot Yaz and the Yaznaya circle pops, or like they loot Milta Power and the Milta Power circle pops, like like they're like, oh, like they have the highest chance to win the game. And I think that either style is applicable, and the results is all depends on how you execute and how you control, because the control aspect comes down to this: if you're playing in center, you want to control a center of the circle so that you maximize your positioning within the zone of where, if it goes here, we have a spot, if it goes here, we have a spot. But on edge, you play for the control of where, if someone comes within our area, we kill them, or we push them away, or like we push into the edge of the circle and we push them off where we want to go. And when it comes to center, you pretty much could say like, wow, I could just sit here to shoot people all day and just like steal kills here and there, but like like the kind of chaos happens there, but a lot of chaos can also happen on the edge. So the center play style is surrounded around sacrificing early and playing for your position aggressively, very aggressively early on, and that some teams, you're willing to take the risk that some teams aren't as so fond of early game, I'd say.
Perfect. I love the detail. Let's flip onto the other side of that coin though, Trevor, with you with the edge play.
Sure. Opposite of what Sean said, in the edge, it's, like we loot Milta Power, and I think it's the best loot spot on the map. Sean will sit here and tell you Pachinki's the best loot spot on the map. But the goal when we loot is, I want everybody to have a scope. I want everyone to have a barrel. I want everyone to have a mini or an SLR, whatever they want to shoot. The biggest thing is, I want every single person to have a 3 vest. That's the most OP item in the game. And that way, when we pull in, we don't care about the first circle. We see where it is. We go, well, it's on the west again, whatever. We just drive in. We just set up on, a high ground spot. You always pick a high ground spot, and then you play for circle 2. And then you play for the game from there. And it's about spreading out and getting control. And a lot of teams fall apart when they attempt to do the edge, I think, is one, you have to have 4 players who are independent. Like we say, Rella's like the caller, and Rella will call like early game. He'll say, hey guys, let's go through potato this one. We'll come up on, through highway or something, but once we're into that mid or late game, sometimes we're spread out 200-300 meters, and anybody can make a call on my team. Like there's nobody questions it, So-and-so just left a compound. Okay, we got to take that compound. And it's not like we're like glued to the, when you're edge team, you're not like glued to the edge, Nick. If you see a spot open up, obviously you take it. But kind of going off what Sean said too, though, if somebody wraps into our area, we're actively looking to take a fight with them, because we know we looted the longest and we came out in last, so we know no one's behind us. So if you're coming to our zone, we probably have more gear than you, and we'll just go take the fight. And that kind of goes into what I said earlier about like the theme of my team, in that we want to be the scariest team to fight. We want people to go, shit, that's Oath. Like, let's not go over there. But the biggest thing about being an edge team is just being really flexible and having like players that, you can rely on no matter what, and players that are very vocal and very aware of the game. And I feel like I don't want to take anything away from center teams. I know they do their homework too, but when you're on the edge, you do a lot of homework. One of the big things we fumbled with in the first week when I told you, it's like there was a lot of new teams and they're just doing random stuff on our edge. And we're like, what is going on? Like, we're taking a fight and there's a team in the blue, like shooting us. Like, who are these people? And then we came back the next week prepared for it. We did a lot of VOD review in between the first week and the second team. And, you have to expect where people will be, but that's a theme across, either style. Like, I don't want to take, like, I know good teams will put in homework no matter what, but it's, a lot of it is because like when you get a PUBG patch, each patch kind of has like a theme with the circles, it feels like. And so you play them in scrims, you play them in real games. So you get a feel for just what goes on around you. You just have to be hyper aware of what's around you and have players that are capable to respond to that.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Damn. I'm going to school today, boys. I'm going to school. Ryan, take it away here. Anything you want to add to either of those play styles?
I'm just gonna talk broadly here, or I'll
Okay.
go into a bit more detail on both. But I think the main thing that everybody I feel like can agree on with PUBG is that probably the most important thing, or at least at the pro level, where everybody can at least like shoot at a similar level. Like everybody's gonna hit shots for the most part, right? So I think the most important thing when it comes to a team and players is the ability to get information, process information, and make decisions. And being able to do that quickly is what is going to make a team like as good as STK or Soniqs or Oath or like not basically. And I think that it's just a different way of how like important or like how you do that playing edge or playing center. Like center, in my opinion, playing center is much more information based than it is edge. And a lot of people would probably think otherwise. Like obviously on edge you need the information to be able to get into zone and move forward and be able to make decisions. The important part of that is being able to do it quickly and because you have less time, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing with center is that you have so many more teams around you. There's so much like I feel like the options are less. Like you have less options when you're in center and you have all the information like you have to have much more information because your options are less because of all the teams that are around you because you've probably lost vehicles because you're like you don't have the scopes or the resources that you might need. While playing edge, it's like you need to get the information to make decisions quickly, but it's like you always still have like all these different options of like, hey, we could go this way, like we could take that fight. Like center, it's kind of like, oh, well, we're here and now we're stuck here until something opens up for us. And it's also another thing of like if you're in center, you want to be able to try to maximize your point value. Like if you're just going to sit center all game until phase 6, 7, and now it's like, oh, okay, we're not really center anymore, and now we have to leave. We don't have cars, and now we just run out and die. It's like you got 1 or 2 kills because they're you stole a kill from 300 meters away. It's like, okay, you got 3 points because you got 1 or 2 placement points and a kill. It's like, all right, but like I just feel like you need that information to be able to make decisions for the later game, and like you need to be constantly like knowing what everything around you is going on, and like that I feel like that's super important for center. Now for edge, it's like your information is what you're doing next, and you're immediately acting on it, and then you're gaining new information, and it's just like you're continuously making new decisions. While center, it's like it's almost like you're planning way more ahead than anything else, while you're like trying to pick up as many points as you can. Like it's a bit different.
To go off Ryan's point and Sean's point a little bit, though, to the best teams, like when Soniqs gets a hard shift, they're instantly a very good edge team. Like, they'll play the edge and they're not scared to play. Vice versa, if we get a power circle, we're a pretty good center team, one of the things, I know one of your points in this segment was, what can maybe lower level teams do to work on it is it's flexibility. You have to decide what you want. Like I can sit here and tell you all day, like I'd rather have a 3 vest when I take a fight, and Sean will say, well, I'd rather be the guy shooting you from the compound. So if that's the flexibility of that, and then you have to play to what the game gives you as well. Like you can't if we're a power team, we're gonna play milk the power. If it's if you're a melee team, you should be you sit in ATC. I don't know. You You do what you think is best for you. So flexibility is a big key to that. But
and that goes back to the like receiving information, being able to process it quickly, and be able to make a decision instantly. Like you have to be flexible on that. Like you can't just sit there and like if you take too long on anything and you hesitation will get you killed. Like that's just it's that simple.
Yeah, whether you're center or edge, like hesitation will get you killed. Yep. Because I feel like no matter what playstyle, center or edge you do, it's all about whatever opportunities you're given, how fast you realize it, and how fast you act upon it. In the sense of where, oh, let's say Mime sees a compound that's more center and sees it as an opportunity to get to a really good spot. But H1 will sit there and say like, as good as that sounds, I think that we can play out of here better than we can over there. And that, you kind of take these like PUBG is no matter what play style, PUBG is a game of calculated risk of where no matter where the circle goes, you figure out what you want to do, and you figure out you kind of like I don't know if I'm not sure if all IGLs have done this because I've worked with H1 for about almost 3 years now. And considering like the development of H1 himself compared to what I've heard of from other IGLs, you kind of wonder like if IGLs all have the same like tendency, whether they're a center caller or whether they're an edge caller, of where like they visually in their heads map out how they want to end up playing this game, and it kind of flows with wherever the circle goes or changes wherever with wherever the circle goes. And I think that a powerful tool that not only an IGL or anybody else can use, no matter what they play, center or edge, is being able to take information and connect that information to the point where it leads you to make plays, or make plays based off of the information or take the opportunities that you see that's right in front of you. So as much as you can be a team on edge and you see a compound fight going on and you're like, oh, it's these two teams, I saw it on kill feed, or like I see this as a play, and like you can like that can be a safe assumption depending on who's looking at it. But let's say you do end up crashing that compound and it's a different fight, then it ends up detrimental. Whereas like like that can happen on center or edge. But I think that looking at each playstyle will have its own individual studying from either team, and also will be very dependent based on like the region. Because I saw a lot of graphics of where we saw like NA and EU versus like Asia and C tendencies or OCE tendencies, of where like like how much fighting goes on edge circles 1 and 2 versus like in between, like let's say like the western and the eastern regions. And this data was actually very different, and that like the numbers that came out were actually pretty stagnating, of where we saw these Sandhawk circle stats, like how last year in 2019 PUBG had Sandhawk. We saw a complete contrast of where NA and EU would hate fighting on edge on Sandhawk, and Asia would love fighting on edge circles 1 and 2. It was night and day. Like if you looked at, let's say, the bottom of my camera, if you looked at that, like NA and EU could be right here, and Asia will be literally at the top. Like there'd be so much fighting, and that was shown by the amount of blue zone damage taken by like the regions. And I guess like the difference from every region can show you new things, and also like the kind of risks you can take. Because from a center team, you could say like, wow, this team did that from center, that's crazy, I would never do that. But you can see like hey, like maybe that's not a bad idea. But like you might even take a center team might take notes from an edge team of where, hey, like like we had a good position early, but then we were forced on the edge, and then we kind of completely forgot what to do. And like going back to like Trevor's point about flexibility, that's where it comes in, of where I saw a team get completely screwed on circle, even though they had the best position circle 1, but then I saw them do this on circle 2 on the edge and completely win out the game. And like sometimes that's not as fathomable for like an IGL or for like a team. But if you look at it from where like like if you could play both, or you can switch off of either one, like by like like taking whatever risks are presented in front of you. Because Trevor said it himself, like we can go from being a center team, get completely screwed on circle, and just play edge the rest of the game. Whereas Trevor's team came into the circle at a decent spot, not necessarily so much center, and they literally saw the circle shift away, completely away from them, and they saw something like in center, like, wow, that's free, we're gonna go for it. And then boom, they went from an edge to a center team. And like that flexibility is very dangerous and a very high cap skill set in PUBG, I feel like.
And on top of that point too, like it's the same thing in both situations. You just all and what Sean said, and I know we do it as well. Rella does it as well in the team. Like planning ahead is so important in this game because you can't be an edge team that's, we're reliant on the hard shift. Like we're barely in on a sliver of the zone. We're a team that almost never takes blue damage, or we try not to, and we don't ever really wrap it all either. But like we're always looking for a way into the zone, whether it be fighting, whether it be pulling up on something. But you can't be like, it's all about minimizing the RNG, and no matter where this circle goes, how do we get there? If it shifts 4 times to the west, something like we've taught, we kind of did the first weekend on us. We send it like we were the original dips free team. We would just drive to the middle and try to run over people, and we take the center spot. And like we always had a discussion within our team, like when is it time to dips free somebody? Because like if the circle is going west, like sometimes it feels like the circles have a trend, and like they just keep going, they keep hard shifting, and then it's like at some point you got to get ahead of the zone and get into it. So you have to be very proactive, and I just always have a plan for everything. So
I think the general summary of this is that the good teams are great at both, and that's
Mhm.
just like you have to be a good team because you can't be reliant on the circle because like as much as you want to sit there and say like, oh, we've seen this zone before, we know where it's gonna end. It's like
what do you mean this one ends right here, Ryan?
yeah, like
Call out PUBG.
Huh?
I've seen this one.
Because I've seen
Yeah.
this one like 10, like 100 times. I've seen the circle like from circle 1. I know exactly where it's gonna go.
They call that circle 1. I
Completely the other direction. Yeah, it's like
circle 1 means nothing.
Yeah. It's like I've seen this circle before. It ends South George every single time. Like no, boom, and it goes all the way to Roshawk. Like those kind of circles. Yeah.
Man, what a time though! What a time! I love that though because it's interesting because with these playstyles again, as a spectator like myself, just watching this stuff kind of go, you wonder what the thought process is team to team, and I think you guys did a really good job kind of going over all those different points between those two playstyles. That brings us to our last section though for the night, which is our week 3 predictions. So we kind of spoke about this kind of just before going live, but we really wanted to touch on some of those teams that are right kind of at that cusp, right? So let's start with Trevor.
Sure, yeah. I think we were talking about this before, and I think we kind of decided we're going to focus on from about 10th place to like 20th, from like Illusion to Ascendance. These are the teams that are, some of them had really great weekends last weekend. Some of them had really iffy weekends, and what we expect and who we expect to come out of this. And I think, Ryan, you said you want to talk about One Eye Open a little bit and how they had a good weekend. I know you had some prep for that a little bit.
I was just saying that I mean, hold on, let me look at it exactly. What was their point total? That out of all of the lower teams, like it wasn't great. Like, 33 points. It's not sitting there like an amazing, or sorry, 49 points. Not an amazing weekend, but it's like 49 points. That's what is that? 10 games. That's 5 points a game. Like that's respectable out of a team that you didn't really expect a lot of, and that's more than what most of these teams are putting up. And I mean, you gotta climb. You're gonna be catching. The team ahead of them at 28, 30, like that's closing the gap, and that's what really matters here. You only need to get top 16 to be in the finals, and then that's where the money is going to be made. Like nobody's going to sit there and remember like, oh, you got 16th in group stage if you get third in the finals. Like that at that point it doesn't matter. And and the finals, like it's 2 weekends. You come out and perform on one weekend, and you could get yourself a top 8 position just from one weekend alone. Like that's just how it is. So it's all they need to be doing is just another weekend like that, and I could see One Eye Open or like another team that did pretty well was Fabled, 44 points. Like, at least solid, not well, like solid enough to like threaten getting into the top 16. But
Most
again,
definitely.
it's also 1 weekend left. Like any of these teams could have a monster week or monster day, like one day. Like they win 1 or 2 games just because of how things are playing out, or they decide to show up that day. It's like that could put them up in the top 16 easily. But I was just looking at When I Opened because I also liked what I saw from. Wait, is it not 2 weekends? Finals is 2 weekends, right?
Finals should be,
finals is
it was 3 last time.
Three, it was 3 last time. I think it's gonna be 3 this time again. Yeah.
It's 3 again? Okay. My bad. My fault. So it's a
Good
different
job.
form. Yeah, it's I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I don't know. The points is not that different from like 16 is what 86 points, and you go all the way down to even like Clueless and Liberate, they're 1 game away. Like 23 points can be covered in 1 game. Like you have one monster game where things are just going right for you, you're fragging out. It's just like they need to actually have that. And I feel like a lot of these teams that I've watched is like they just kind of hang around and don't like make plays. Like they're just kind of like, okay, we're in the zone, we're good, guys. Let's see what the next zone is, and then like that's it. Like, and then it's like the next zone comes, and it's like, all right, we got to figure out how to get into this zone. It's like they're not using that time where they're in that zone and they're safe to like plan ahead or try to look for like what they're going to be doing next or like looking for that info. They're just kind of like, okay, we're going to wait for the zone and then we're going to look for what we have to do. Like that's what it almost seems like to me, and that's not something you're supposed to be doing.
100%. 100%. You do see that quite a bit. I've noticed that too, where some teams will have not that bad of a position and that passivity just bites them. You know, unfortunately, they'll get collapsed upon. They'll get sandwiched between 2 teams, or one team up close and another team from further out that has a good position to just pick off points, and you're seeing that. Another team I did want to mention though, who's just right there at that 10th place, was Illusion. Illusion actually had a 67-point week, and they're one of those teams where I think just the right things the right tweaks can take them to that next level of play. They've shown their ability to still get scrappy with some of the teams who you would otherwise want to turn tail and run from, and they've shown an ability to sometimes be able to last into those later games, and if not, still put up a reasonable amount of points. Illusion is definitely one of my teams that I'd be picking up and watching come week 3, most definitely.
I kind of feel like all these teams from like 10, I'm looking at it now again, 10 to like 13, like we have the Rumblers in there, Ryan's team, we have Gas Cans, Attack 8. I kind of feel like they're all, I feel like 100 and up they're probably going to be fine. They would have to have a catastrophically bad weekend to like get passed up by this many teams below them. But it gets pretty tight right around that 16th place. We have ATC who got 4th last time. They were only 5 points behind, or 4 or 5 points behind STK in the final. And they're on the cusp. They're tied for 16th. That's a team like might have a lot of pressure on them this weekend. For these teams in this area this weekend, like I was saying earlier, it's the opposite. Like the top half of this leaderboard, we're chilling. Like we're vibing. We're gonna single player games this weekend. We're gonna shoot at some people, and we're gonna get ready for the final. Like a couple of us at the top, like I know we're looking to make like $1,000 more, $2,000 more. Luke's pretty much got all the bonuses tied up. So, but the teams in this bottom half, like they have all the pressure on them. You have teams like, Liberate, there have been 2 times the finals team. They made some big roster changes here. They got rid of, who I would have said was their best player, Matthias, last season. And, it's not looking so hot for them. They have a lot of pressure on them to perform here. It's, I know. I wonder how much Baja's getting like pushed into like a leadership position on that team. I know everyone here knows he's super capable, and he can call with the best of them. And he's been, I played at the highest level since this game came out. But teams like this, I want to see how the stress gets to him. Clueless is a similar boat. Like Sharu on that team, the MPL player, like played at a really high level. Hambino's like, the guy's a nut. He's hard to fight. He's a strong player, but are they able to, carry the rest of their team emotionally, like through that stress, like bring the attitude up and get it rolling? Because they do need, some of these teams, they need big weekends, like to feel comfortable. Because it's not just about like we look at this and they're 20 points back, but there's like 7 teams around them. That's like half, a quarter of the lobby. So a lot of that's fluctuating. So see how they do.
Most definitely. Anything picking out to you, Sologic?
So yeah, I'm just eyeing straight down from about like, let's say like 10 or like even as far as like 13, like that 100-point gap. There's always a kind of prediction of cutoff, and like it's like the cutoff to make top 16, the cutoff to make X, or like the cutoff of a qualification. And I think as much as you can estimate that, is that like you have to look at yourself. Let's say you're in San Diego Rarity's position, you're in 18th, you're at 76 points, and 16th has 86 points. You can look at that in two ways. Fabled has 10 more points than us. If we like have one good game, we can immediately catch up, or like if we have a good day, we can catch up. But it's like you have to look at every other surrounding team and think they can all have as good of a day as us. And I think that if there's like, I can list out oddball teams of where like you can have Rarity, One Eye Open, Ascendance, and Clueless, and Gravity all go out and just like, I don't know, eliminate a team just suddenly, and either that or just get eliminated early. So looking at a couple names here, like Tactical 8 had a great week 1. I hope they can continue that. And then like one notable name that's down in there is ATC, and I'm wondering like what happened from the PCS2 Finals ATC to the now fighting for top 16 ATC. And I think that the team is an immensely capable team, and as much as they may not like the kind of troll mark around them of where they don't scrim and stuff like that kind of happens, it's like they're kind of that oddball team where I know they're capable of it, and that they can easily go from 15th to like top like maybe like top 10, and like given they have a good week. So I think ATC will be looking to piece something together to completely grasp their finals berth. I think that Fabled has the opportunity, but if these oddball teams don't let it happen, then like it might be difficult for them. But I think that if one of the teams, Clueless or Liberate, can really put together a solid weekend, that they can make the jump over the rest of these like kind of oddball teams. Because I feel like Clueless is a team that has a lot of talent, and that it's something that just needs to find direction. Because Hambina's a great player. I know that Nick was like another very popular OC player. Shuru's like like the ADR god, and like he if he could put out damage in like the key moments, if he could frag out, I'm pretty sure they can do well. And I'm pretty sure like a lot of these oddball teams are going to be the ones really jumbling up like everybody going into the weekend to see who comes out in top 16. And that there's always that chip on the shoulder, is that if you are close to if you're on the cusp of making top 16, you have to always be conscious about what the other teams are doing, especially when it's coming down to the wire, like what the other teams around your point scale are doing, what's happening to them. And you need to capitalize whenever you get the opportunity. Because like the story about these teams that are down here is that it's possible that they either made poor decisions, or that they miss a lot of the opportunities that they had, and that it puts the pressure on everybody down there, because there's 8 teams eliminated from this. So yeah, I think that ATC, I think Clueless, and I think possibly like the Rumblers will be making their way up too, because I think a lot of these teams, like it's either they know or they don't. I think like they know how to do it, or they just don't know. And I think that the more experienced teams will possibly have an easier time like when they just focus on themselves rather than the others.
Definitely.
Yeah, Definitely. Going off that point too, it's just going to be a fun weekend to watch, because you have this really fun like juxtaposition of, like I was been saying, you have teams that have no pressure, and then teams that have a lot of pressure. And some of these teams that have no pressure, like if some, they might be headhunting,
Yep. That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying before with like when STK got a knock, we're like, oh, there's no way they're gonna push that team, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, seems like they're just practicing pushing bad pushes, like because they can.
Like, I mean, if we get a knock on a team that we don't want to make the finals because they're annoying to us, like we'll probably just push them. So that we have no pressure. Like we're just gonna, we'll just full throttle. So that's like it's a fun juxtaposition we have this weekend going into the games, and I'm excited to watch. I know other teams will probably be doing the same thing, because you kind of have an idea of where people want to loot or where they rotate to, and if you can help shape your finals to make it a little bit simpler for you, it'll why not? So
that's just ambiguous enough to be scary. Okay, just watch your teams, friends. Watch your teams. Was there anything that anybody else wanted to add into that before we kind of wrap up here?
Just don't run into anybody top 5. If you want to make top 5, I'm just kidding.
I have no control of Snickers this weekend. He can do whatever he wants. There's
same thing with me. It's like if
there's a wild New Jersey man on the loose with a 4X barrel. All right, so watch out.
Yep, there was that moment that Phluxy opened it up when they talked about us, is that like we saw like he saw Liberate in a position where they're like, okay, like seems okay, and then all of a sudden in the flick of a switch they were 3 down. So like it's a matter of like like the top teams are there because they will do it, and then like whether like the bottom teams are just as willing when they come into the weekend, because any team from down there can just bring the fire. Like I've seen, like some of these top teams will just somehow just lose. It's like there's some of those moments where like, wow, he was just better. Like
I know CD6 had a stat. I'm trying to find it in the spreadsheet of like team fights, teams that get team fights done, and like they have minimum 10 team fights, like dominating teams. And it was a really fun stat to see like how teams perform against other teams directly.
Yeah, they have kills against specific teams. Like like SCK has killed ATC more than any other team. Or like
which makes sense because they they probably don't want them to make the final.
You guys have killed T8 more than anyone else. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Where are you? Actually, you killed SCK more than anyone else.
That's my work,
So. Team leaderboard. I'm trying to find it myself.
It's the very last tab. BE kills. So like the teams that have fought the most out of all teams though have been Soniqs and Veritas. No other 2 teams have run into each other more.
Yeah, Snickers GM, he said 20% of all his kills have been on Liberate. So apparently, when we fought them, we won 100% of the time. So.
Oh man.
I want to see if there's any teams that have never run into each other.
Yeah, because the least here is what like.
Now it's all ones.
Yeah, it's all ones of like ATC, Ascendants, Comets, Fabled, Dodge and us, like Fabled, like SDR, gas cans, a little bit of Hardshifts in there, one eye open. So I feel like
a lot of those are like the lower teams probably die early. So
yeah, interesting. That's actually a really cool stat. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, this is really cool to look at. I think I was just gonna say one thing. I think that one of the things that you're gonna see with the difference of like the bottom 8 teams and who's going to actually like make it, and I think it's actually just going to come down to like one of their players is just gonna have to become like clutch up and have like an amazing performance. Right? Like it's gonna be someone on some team that is just going to pop off one day, and they're going to like, and they're just gonna have an amazing day, and it's going to make like be the difference for their team, and that's really it. Like sometimes it's just that's what it takes. Is just somebody just steps up and they perform.
And that person, will, like I was kind of trying to get that point. It's like they're gonna rally the troops a little bit too. Like, so they need like a lot of these teams at the bottom. I feel like they don't have like an identity within their team, and like they need to find like that leader that's gonna make them pop off, like what Ryan's saying. So. I think this weekend's always one of my favorite weekends. Well, for me, because like we're chilling, but like it's always one of the fun weekends to watch in the qualifier when it's like you don't, like there's teams with no stress and teams with a lot of stress. So let's watch them run into each other, and we're gonna sit back and watch. So I'm excited.
Definitely, it'll be a great week to watch, and we'll be able to touch base. By the way, I did want to say, while I have everybody here, if anybody's just watching, if any of you ever want certain topics to be discussed or any specifics that we're not quite touching on, feel free to DM us. You can DM any of us on the thing with the bird Twitter. Sorry, I'm a boomer. You could slide in Discord, whatever the case is. And yeah, any of those things. I would love to touch on some other topics that maybe we're not quite discussing that you'd love to see. But with that said, the thing with the bird, dude, it's the blue bird, right? We're all on the thing with the bird, dude. Most definitely. But thank you guys for your time. It was a pleasure as well as a privilege, and friends viewing, thank you guys for coming along for the journey. We'll be back here next Thursday to touch base on everything that will go crazy tomorrow and moving forward. Yeah. We'll be ready. But my friends, have a good evening. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here tonight. And I will see you guys sooner than later.